Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for Throwback Thursday and for our first episode of History at Home. My name is Zack. I'm a historical interpreter for Three Rivers Park District. Now, normally our historical interpreters are out and about in the parks helping connect people to history in the parks, but given current circumstances, we're all hard at work coming up with new videos and digital content to help people connect to history in their home, which isn't so hard because history is all around us all the time. And it's a great reminder that history can be super helpful in our everyday lives. Like, just for example, the other day I was at the grocery store and I was doing my grocery shopping and picking up all the essentials. You know, I got my flour, milk, eggs, but when I went to get the butter, the shelves were completely empty. There was no butter left. But thankfully, I've learned some lessons from the past from people who came before me, like subsistence farmers from the 1850s who had to make their own butter. So I took 5 or 6 steps further down the aisle to where they sell the heavy cream, and I got a couple pints of that, knowing that with heavy cream and with little elbow grease, you and I, we can make our own butter at home in our kitchens, and I will show you just how to do that. If you were going to start from scratch, you'd have to, go out back and milk the cow and get a pail full of milk. And then you let that sit out, overnight or so. And over time, the cream would separate out from the milk because they have a different density. And then we really just want the cream in order to make the butter. So you'd go and kind of scoop that off the top and set the milk aside. The cream is what we want. Now, I've cheated because I just went ahead and bought some heavy cream at the grocery store, so I didn't have to go milk my cow this morning, thankfully. So we've already got that cream. Now, cream is a liquid, but it's an emulsion. So there's these small fat globules that are inside the cream. And what we need to do is we need to agitate it or mix it up enough that we're going to break up those fat globules that are inside there. And that's actually going to change the chemical composition. It's going to change the chemistry of what we're working with. And it's going to start to separate out into a solid, which is the butter that we want, and a liquid byproduct of this, which is called buttermilk. And we can set that aside. We can use that for other things too. There are several methods you could use in order to stir up or agitate your cream and turn it into butter. For example, one simple method you could use is pour your cream into a jar and just shake it up long enough until it turns into butter. That's one way. If you wanted to speed up the process, you could use an electric mixer like this, and it's just like if you've made whipped cream at home using heavy cream before too, you just take it a step farther until it turns into butter. So that'll get it done much quicker. Now, I'm a historical interpreter, and so I'm gonna go old school, and I'm going to use this 19th century butter churn, okay? So people have used a variety of different styles of butter churns to make butter for hundreds, even thousands of years. This style was very popular in the 19th century. It has a ceramic container and then this stick that goes inside, and it kind of works like a plunger. It's called a dasher, and you're just going to go up and down, and it stirs up and agitates the cream that's inside and turns it into butter. So that's the method that I'm going to use. And again, since I'm a historical interpreter, I think I can take this up a notch. Let's see what we can do. There we go. Now I feel a little bit more like an 1850s farmer churning his own butter. But wait, shouldn't I be in like a log cabin or something? There we go. I think that'll work a little bit better. Now we just have to pour our cream in and get started. It's hard to say just how long this is going to take. It depends on the method you're using, it depends on how much cream you're starting with, and it kind of depends on how angry you've been that day. But I think I'm going to be here for a little while, okay? Today, a dairy cow, an average dairy cow, can produce about 6 gallons of milk per day, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the breed. Some of the historic breeds, like from the 1850s, would produce less milk than the ones that have been bred to be modern dairy cows today, but about 6 gallons a day, which is quite a bit of milk. But in order to produce that milk, cows have to eat a whole lot. So cows eat about 2% of their weight every day in hay or grass, whatever feed they're eating. So a 1,200-pound cow would eat about 24 pounds of hay every single day, which Might not sound like a lot, but hay isn't very heavy, so that's actually like a whole lot of hay, right? But one of the best things you can feed cows to help with their milk production is actually alfalfa. It's really high in protein and a lot of other nutrients that help dairy cows produce a lot of milk. And that reminds me of one of my favorite local history stories. You see, alfalfa doesn't grow naturally in Minnesota. In fact, it was really hard to start growing alfalfa in Minnesota. A lot of the first earliest Minnesota farmers would try to grow alfalfa and they would fail because of the cold temperatures and the harsh winters. The alfalfa just wouldn't last. It wasn't until industrious farmer named Wendelin Grimm, he was the one that really made it work. Wendelin Grimm grew up in a small farming community in what is now southern Germany. And in 1857, he and his wife emigrated from Germany to the United States, and they settled here in Minnesota in Carver County. In 1857, he started a small farm, and he planted a field of alfalfa from a 20-pound bag of seeds that he brought over from Germany. Now, he planted that field of alfalfa, and after the first winter, almost all of his plants died. It was just too cold. The winter was too harsh, but a few plants survived. So he collected the seeds from those plants and he replanted them. And the next year, a few more plants survived than the year before. And he kept doing that year after year until over time, Wendelin Grimm developed a winter hardy variety of alfalfa that grew well here in Minnesota. Now, a lot of the other farmers in his area started noticing that Wendelin Grimm, his dairy cows were really big and he was producing a lot of milk. And when they asked, they said, what kind of corn are you feeding them? And he said, I'm not feeding him corn, I'm just feeding him alfalfa. And so he kind of started teaching other people how to grow this winter hardy variety of alfalfa. And over time, they all wanted his alfalfa seeds so they could feed their dairy cows that same alfalfa. After a while, this winter hardy variety of alfalfa that Wendelin Grimm developed, it became known nationally, not just regionally. And people all over the country wanted this Grimm alfalfa that they could feed to their dairy cows to increase their production. And it was really important for establishing Minnesota and the Midwest as this dairy belt because this alfalfa helped our cows produce so much milk. And so a lot of historians credit Wendelin Grimm and this Grimm alfalfa with really being the foundation of this dairy belt, this Minnesota dairy industry and dairy history here in Minnesota. We couldn't have done it without Wendelin Grimm and his alfalfa. I think that's enough for right now. I think we should take a little break and go on an adventure. Let's take a little break. Wendelin Grimm grew a lot of his alfalfa in this space right behind me right now. I'm just outside Victoria, Minnesota, out at Carver Park Reserve. It's a huge park in the Three Rivers system with miles of trails for hiking and biking and horseback riding. It has the Lowry Nature Center. There's a campground and a beach. There's an archery range. And it's also home to the Grimm Farm Historic Site. That's right, this is the original Grimm house. Well, it's the second one that they built. This house was built in 1875 and it's on the National Register of Historic Places. And surrounding me here is the Grimm Farm Historic Site. This is the site where they were farming and where Wendelin Grimm was saving those seeds each year and planting that alfalfa until he had a winter hardy variety that really became the foundation of the dairy industry in here in Minnesota. I mean, if we're in the dairy belt, then this house, this farm right here is like the buckle of the dairy belt. But enough about this, we should probably get back and check on the butter. Okay, now we're back in the kitchen and the butter is starting to get hard. We're almost there, we're almost done. If you use the electric mixer, it probably only took you a couple minutes. If you use the butter churn, it probably took you an hour or more. But we're almost there. What I want to do now is I'm just going to pour this all out into the mixing bowl so I can get a look at it and it's a little bit more manageable. Okay, cool. Check this out, guys. This is what we wanted. So in this bowl is almost entirely liquid. This is all buttermilk. And if you look down in the bottom in our churn here is almost solid butter. Okay, so you can see how it really separated from this yellow solid butter and that white buttermilk. That's exactly what we wanted to happen. All right, so check this out. We've got our solid butter here now, and I'm using these tools called a butter paddle. What we're gonna do is just start kind of mashing it around a little bit more to get as much of that liquid out as possible. Just kind of forming it into a nice bar and as we kind of keep squeezing it and forming it and molding it, you're gonna see more of that buttermilk coming out. That's exactly what we want. We want to get as much of that liquid out really as we can. Our butter's starting to look pretty good, but what I want to do now is we're actually going to put it into a butter mold. Okay, in the 19th century, it was pretty common to serve your butter in a molded shape, and so I've got a couple different butter molds here. So here's one, and you can see here it's got kind of this floral pattern on it. If you can see that, and so we're going to pack the butter into here. And it's going to make it a nice presentable shape that we can put on the table to serve. After packing the butter into the molds, I put them into the refrigerator to chill for a little bit, and now we're going to open them up and see how they look. This mold actually turned out really, really well. This other mold is really kind of a disaster. So there we have it, our own butter made right here in our own kitchen. So it's something that you can do at home. You know, if you go to the store and you see that they're all out of butter, you know that you can just buy some heavy whipping cream and make your own butter pretty easily at home. Whether you make your own butter at home or if you buy a stick of butter at the grocery store, it's an important reminder that we are all a part of that shared history. People have been making and eating butter for thousands of years, and in Minnesota, we've been producing butter here very well for over 150 years, thanks to the contributions of Wendelin Grimm and his winter hardy alfalfa. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us for our first episode of History at Home. We'll see you next week for another Throwback Thursday.